Welcome to you both. We're in the midst of a debate about nuclear energy. The CSIRO says the economic case does not stack up. What's your view of the opposition's proposal? Trevor St Baker, first to you.
Well, removing the ban is a good policy for any party to have, but espousing the commercial responses on removing the ban is uncertain at the moment. Every continent has nuclear as part of their mix of about 5 or 10% of their energy generating capability. And for Australia to be different from that is unusual. But what the commercial response would be is something that will happen once we remove the bans and the moratoriums.
Bruce Mountain, do questions over the renewables transition to net zero mean that nuclear energy should now be a part of the conversation?
I think we're seeing in countries across the world that nuclear is being taken seriously. And I think it would be a mistake if we too didn't take it seriously. But we also know from recent developments of nuclear in the Western world that it's incredibly expensive and time-consuming, and there's no short list of risks associated with it. So a great deal of progress needs to be made in the construction, I think, before it has a promising future. But that doesn't mean that it should be off the agenda and that we shouldn't be taking it seriously.
Bruce, Trevor mentioned the moratorium. That does make this debate somewhat tricky, does it not? Is it surmountable and should it be?
I don't think there's a good case for banning nuclear, at least not in terms of the economics. There may be other reasons for that. But I don't think in the case of the economics it should be banned. I think there's a great deal we don't know, not just about nuclear, but about all sorts of electricity technologies. And I think it would be a fine thing to have it on the agenda and let it be discovered as to what the possibilities are.
Trevor, you've long been an investor and a big investor in the energy space. Can I ask why you are a stakeholder in the consultancy SMR, or small modular reactor nuclear technology?
Well, it's only an entity we established in 2009, or more than 13 years ago, to try to argue that we shouldn't ban any option for power generation, and once the small modular reactors came in, the idea was that if you can have nuclear submarines, that you could have the nuclear submarines on land just as safely as having them in submarines, and we only set that up not to build nuclear, not to promote nuclear, just to say that if we're going to get rid of coal, we had to look at all the options for baseload 24/7 power, and in every other continent, nuclear is a small but important 5 to 10% contributor to the energy mix in every continent in the world.
I want to ask you about renewables, but first, do you think that could also be the case in Australia, that it could contribute that percentage to our energy mix?
Well, at the moment we've got 60% coal providing our energy, our electricity energy, and we're aiming to bring in renewables and they need huge batteries to make the renewables 24/7. So whether or not they can replace the whole of the 60% that coal is presently providing is very difficult, and we think that nuclear probably has to be a small but important part of it. But more importantly, it doesn't involve any of my time. It's just I'm an advocate for removing the ban. Full stop. St Baker businesses have gone right out of electricity generation. We're into virtual generation behind the meter on rooftop solar with major batteries, and this is where Professor Mountain and I have sort of certainly we've known each other in this business for a long time in the general energy policy area, but I think we've found a certain agreement that As we've expanded as much as we have the grid-based solar farms and wind farms that we need now to look at energy storage and transmission lines that are competing for land and environmental approvals around the country, that it means that another of the mix for energy for supplying our energy needs into the future around the clock and 24/7 is going to come from commercial rooftop solar on commercial premises with large-scale batteries that can be virtual generators behind the grid, and we think that is going to become a major contributor in place of some of the grid-based solar and transmission lines that are having difficulty getting their approvals and competition for land.
Bruce, is that also how you see it? Is the current emphasis on poles and wires misguided?
Yes, I think large-scale wind and solar has a role, and there are many wind and solar farms that are not problematic, but I think there are many that are, and we are seeing now that the transmission implications are enormous, and so alternatives need to be found that have a much lower social cost. Rooftop solar on households is now one of our largest single sources of clean energy. And there's enormous untapped potential on the roofs of our businesses and warehouses and shopping centres. In fact, when you add it up, if it's suitably harnessed and stored, it can be enough electricity on those roofs to meet almost the entire electricity demand of the grid. So there's an enormous untapped potential. There's a great interest in it from the building owners. It brings gains for them, but it brings gains for the whole community. And I think this would be the policy possibility to put right at the top of the agenda. We can quickly make progress with those things, and I see no good reason why governments of all complexions shouldn't be backing it right away.
Now, we are short on time, but Bruce, are you concerned at the prospect that the opposition's proposal will kill the signal for private investment in renewable solutions?
What the opposition have proposed is 7 reactors. If those are built based on expected demand out to 2050, they're likely to result in about 10 to 15% of the electricity production nationally. So a relatively small proportion. More electricity than that is actually produced by rooftop solar right now. So I don't think it of itself should deter investors. There will need to be a demand for considerable expansion from alternative sources. I think it'll be important to see what the coalition has to say about those alternative sources, because it will be not just nuclear at the bottom, but also alternative sources that are needed. And so I think the extent to which investors are put off by this will be most telling as regards the other elements of the policy suite that they bring forward.
Trevor, what will the market decide?
Well, the important thing about commercial rooftop solar supported by large-scale batteries is that this can have bipartisan support. We've been in a business where suddenly energy is being debated and politicians are coming to different conclusions on the surface of the public discussion. But I think there is a bipartisan agreement that it comes sometimes spoken of as community batteries, but community batteries behind the meter in the commercial premises has the capacity to provide a major contribution towards the replacement of the 60% of coal-fired generation that we're relying on at the moment. So the important thing from my point of view is that it'll be behind the meter. It doesn't need development approvals. All it needs is arrangements where they can. It'll attract private investment by the property owners to trade in the market from virtual generation behind the meter in commercial premises. And I think it's going to be a very important contribution. Not only some of my companies are involved in that, the other companies, other generators, other generator retailers are looking at rooftop solar and battery support in the same way. So it's quietly becoming a more significant contributor, and it doesn't have the competition for land and the transmission lines that people are concerned about with the grid-based renewables expansion.
And finally, what is your view, Trevor, on what the market will decide on nuclear?
Oh, a view on... I think there will be some nuclear. I think it'll be very small, but we'll see. The important thing is they have an 80-year life, so it's a question of investors having the confidence of government that the rules won't change too much to need it. But at the moment, 24/7 baseload power opportunities are needed to keep our lights on and our business in Australia and our jobs in Australia. Our jobs in Australia rely on low-cost 24/7 power, and if we can't guarantee that into the future, well, we won't even need any generation because we won't have the businesses and we won't have the jobs.
It is a big topic. It's been terrific to talk to you both. Hopefully we can do it again. Trevor St Baker, Bruce Mountain, thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you.